Imagine a towering galactic empire, moments away from sealing its greatest victory, only for a single child to whisper the unthinkable. It's a forgery. In an instant, the future of worlds trembles, trust shatters, and the fate of peace hangs by a thread. Will truth rise, or will betrayal plunge the stars into chaos? If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, let's jump into the story. It was an ordinary morning on the 37th floor of the Celestial Concord Tower, the tallest structure on Orion's Gate Station. The tower gleamed beneath the artificial sun of the vast dome that shielded the station from the vacuum of space. Corridors echoed with the footsteps of countless travelers, ambassadors, merchants, and envoys from a dozen worlds, all moving with purpose through polished walkways. Today was no ordinary day. Today would decide the balance of power across the galaxy. In a private chamber at the tower's core, Emperor Kaldar IV of the Dracorian Dominion adjusted the golden clasps of his ceremonial armor. His white scales reflected the light like polished stone, and the crimson jewel set into his crown pulsed with a quiet rhythm. Kaldar carried himself with the strength of a warrior and the calm of a ruler who believed destiny was in his grasp. Before him lay the treaty, a document written on ancient parchment rather than digital screens. This choice was not for show, but for security. The parchment could not be hacked or rewritten by hidden hands. It required rare inks that shifted color if altered. Kaldar viewed it as flawless, untouchable, beyond suspicion. To him, it was the final step in 7 years of patient diplomacy, an agreement that promised his dominion control over the mineral-rich Helion Nebula. With the treaty in hand, Kaldar left his chamber to clear his mind. He entered the reflection hall, a quiet antechamber where rulers often paused before signing history into being. The hall was designed for solitude, its tall windows offering a view of the stars beyond the dome. Yet as Kaldar stepped inside, he found he was not alone. A young boy sat on one of the benches near the viewing portal. He could not have been more than 12 years old, with dark hair neatly tied back and a plain white shirt tucked into simple trousers. In his hands rested a paper notebook, the kind rarely seen in this age of data tablets. He was writing quietly, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, that the Emperor had entered. Kaldar frowned. This was the most restricted floor of the tower. How could a child be here sitting calmly as though the chamber belonged to him? The Emperor's voice rumbled low, firm but not unkind. "Boy, what are you doing in this place? These halls are meant for diplomats, not children." The boy looked up without fear. His eyes were steady, almost too calm for someone so young. "I'm waiting for my guardian," he said. "She works on the translation systems for the treaty. My name is Lucian." Kaldar tilted his head. He had not been told the human delegation had brought children. Yet there the boy was, speaking with confidence, holding a notebook as though it were armor. The Emperor approached and seated himself on the opposite bench. The parchment rested across his armored lap. "And do you find Orion's Gate to your liking, Lucian of Earth?" Lucian shrugged, glancing at the towering walls and the parchment in the Emperor's hands. "It's interesting. Different from the colonies where I live. Everything here feels older, heavier with history." His gaze lingered on the treaty. "Is that the document? The one everyone is talking about?" A small smile touched Kaldar's lips, revealing the tips of sharp teeth. "Indeed, this is the accord. It will shape the future of our peoples. One day, it may be studied in your schools." Lucian leaned forward, his tone curious but serious. "May I see it? I study languages with my guardian. She says treaties are like puzzles, each word hiding meaning. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps pride, but Kaldar turned the parchment slightly so the boy could view the text. After all, what danger could come from letting a child look at a treaty already perfected? Lucian's eyes moved quickly across the lines. His brow furrowed as he scanned page after page. The silence stretched as Kaldar waited, amused by the boy's focus. Then Lucian spoke, his words calm but sharp. "This isn't right. It's a forgery." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. He thought he had misheard. A forgery? Impossible. This parchment was prepared by my most trusted advisors. It cannot be changed. Lucian shook his head. "Look here. This clause about emergency authority. The words have been altered. They look correct at first glance, but they shift the power away from shared rule. If this is signed, your commanders could take full control whenever they wish." Kaldar snatched the parchment closer, his eyes scanning the section the boy pointed to. Once, twice, a third time. Each reading deepened the chill crawling up his spine. The red jewel in his crown dimmed, and for the first time in years, the Emperor felt his composure falter. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "This cannot be true." Yet the proof lay in the boy's words and on the parchment itself. Lucian closed his notebook gently. "My guardian told me about tricks like this in old treaties. Clever changes that looked harmless but broke promises. Some of those changes caused wars." The reflection hall grew quiet again. The hum of the station distant, the stars beyond the dome cold and unblinking. Kaldar sat frozen, torn between disbelief and the undeniable truth before him. The treaty, the foundation of his legacy, might not be what it seemed. And so began the unraveling of destiny. Not with a clash of armies, but with the clear voice of a child. The silence of the reflection hall lingered long after Lucian's words. Emperor Kaldar stared at the parchment in disbelief, the weight of realization pressing heavily against his chest. The treaty, the very document meant to secure his empire's future, now seemed tainted with shadows. His scales, normally bright and commanding, dimmed with unease. Lucian sat quietly, his small hands folded around his notebook. He had spoken with certainty, ... And Kaldar knew the boy's claim could not be ignored. The Emperor drew in a slow breath, his deep voice rolling like distant thunder. "Come with me, Lucian. If what you say is true, we must bring this before someone who can confirm it." Together, they left the chamber, their footsteps echoing through the grand corridor. Guards and attendants pressed themselves aside, astonished to see the Emperor walking briskly with a child at his side. Whispers filled the air, yet no one dared question Kaldar. They arrived at the translation offices, a cluster of modest rooms filled with glowing consoles and shelves of reference materials. Here worked the unseen minds who kept galactic diplomacy alive, translating the fine details of law across dozens of alien tongues. Kaldar's entrance drew immediate silence. Every worker rose to their feet, their eyes wide with alarm. "Where is Amira Tanner?" Kaldar's voice was sharp, commanding. A woman at the far end of the room stood slowly. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, her uniform plain and practical. She looked surprised, and even more so when her eyes fell on Lucian at the Emperor's side. "I am Amira," she said cautiously. "Your Majesty, why is my son with you?" Kaldar placed the parchment on the nearest desk, his claws resting heavily against the table's edge. "Your son has accused this treaty of being forged. I want you to examine it." Amira's face drained of color. She looked from the Emperor to Lucian, her lips trembling. "What have you done?" she whispered to the boy. Lucian answered calmly, his tone steady. "I just told him the truth, Mother." The Emperor's voice rumbled low but steady. "See for yourself." Amira's hands shook as she took the parchment. Her eyes darted across the text, moving quickly through the clauses and subclauses. The room was silent, but for the faint hum of the consoles. Then her brow furrowed, her shoulders stiffened, and at last she looked up. "He's right," she said firmly, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "This document is not the one that was negotiated. Here, the phrasing has been shifted, just enough to change everything. It grants unilateral power to your commanders. The promise of joint governance is an illusion." A murmur spread through the room. Kaldar stood frozen, the reality settling heavily upon him. 7 years of diplomacy, 7 years of careful balance and trust, and it had nearly been undone by deceit. "Who prepared this version of the treaty?" Kaldar demanded. One of the senior technicians spoke nervously. "Vizier Malkor, Your Majesty. He supervised the final draft, as he has done for decades." The name struck like a blade. Malkor, Kaldar's most trusted advisor, the architect of many alliances, the one who had guided him since his ascension. A wave of betrayal washed over him. Kaldar's tail lashed sharply against the floor, making several workers flinch. "Summon him, now." As the staff hurried, Galdar turned back to Amira. "You were once a linguist?" Amira nodded slowly. "I was Deputy Chief of Language Services for Earth's Diplomatic Corps. I specialized in Dracorian dialects, but after the Mars Uprising, my name was struck from official roles. I took whatever work I could find. Now I repair translation systems rather than draft treaties." Kaldar studied her carefully. Her voice carried not bitterness, but resilience. It was clear she still bore the knowledge and skills that had once made her respected. Lucien stepped closer to his mother, his expression calm but proud. "I only repeated what you taught me. Words matter more than weapons." The Emperor's gaze shifted between mother and child. His heart wrestled with anger at the betrayal and gratitude for the unlikely discovery. Soon, the chamber doors opened. Malkor was escorted inside by 2 guards. He was an older Dracorian, his bronze scales gleaming, his robes marked with authority. His expression was smooth, carefully neutral, but his eyes flicked briefly toward the parchment. "You summoned me, my Emperor," Malkor said, bowing with practiced grace. Kaldar's voice thundered through the chamber. "This treaty, explain these changes, explain why the promises of balance were twisted into deception." Malkor feigned confusion, lifting the parchment with a steady hand. "Your Majesty, I do not see what you mean. The treaty is sound. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding." Amira stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp. "These clauses are deliberate. The wording alters authority, undermines cooperation. In human history, treaties like this have sparked wars. The deception is clear." Malkor's mask flickered. His eyes narrowed as he glanced briefly at Amira, then at Lucien, but he quickly regained composure. "Surely this is a translation flaw, nothing more." Kaldar's scales darkened with anger. "Do not lie to me, Malkor. My tongue and yours share the same root. This is no error. This is betrayal." The room grew tense, the air heavy as silence settled once again. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation. Emperor against Vizier, truth against deception. Inside Kaldar, the storm built. His most trusted aide stood accused of treachery. His empire's honor hung in balance, and the boy and his mother had opened his eyes to what he had almost signed blindly. This was no longer about a single treaty. It was about truth, trust, and the future of the galaxy. And as Kaldar's gaze locked with Malkor's, he knew the unraveling truth had only just begun. The chamber fell silent as Emperor Kaldar's words echoed against the walls. The accusation hung heavy in the air, pressing down on everyone present. Vizier Malkor stood at the center, his bronze scales glinting faintly in the pale light. For decades, he had been Kaldar's most trusted advisor, the architect of countless treaties. Now suspicion wrapped around him like a tightening chain. Malkor raised his head, his expression calm, his voice even. "Your Majesty, there must be some mistake. I have served the Dominion faithfully for years. If there is confusion in the treaty, it is nothing more than a translation flaw." Amira Tanner stepped forward before Kaldar could respond. Her voice was steady, her words sharp. "This is not a mistake. The changes are deliberate. Each altered phrase has meaning. It is written to grant your commanders absolute power, stripping away the very balance that was promised." Malkor's eyes flickered briefly, narrowing as he regarded the woman. "And who are you," he asked coldly, "to speak of treaties and governance?" Amira did not flinch. "I am a linguist. I spent years studying the laws of many worlds, and I know when words are twisted to deceive. I know when language is used as a weapon." Lucian clutched his notebook, his young voice breaking the silence. "She's right. I saw it too. You tried to hide it. But the truth is clear." The vizier's jaw tightened, his composure faltering for a moment before returning. He turned his gaze back to the emperor. "Your Majesty, surely you will not allow the words of a child and a disgraced translator to outweigh the loyalty of your vizier." Kaldar's tail lashed once across the floor, the sound sharp as a crack of thunder. "Do not speak to me of loyalty. Loyalty is built on truth, and truth does not fear examination." His voice rumbled deep, filling the room with authority. The emperor took the parchment from Amira's hands and held it up. His reptilian eyes scanned the altered clauses again. He had read these lines many times, but now, with the truth revealed, he could no longer unsee the deception. "Malkor," Kaldar said slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "These changes are no accident. They are the work of a careful hand. Yours." Malkor's lips curled into a thin smile. The mask of innocence finally slipped. "And if they are mine, so what?" His voice grew louder, his tone sharpened with defiance. "Do you truly believe the Dominion should bow to the idea of shared governance? We are the strongest empire in this galaxy. The Helion Nebula should belong to us alone. The weaker species should not dictate terms to us." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Attendants exchanged anxious glances, their fear rising like a tide. Amira stepped closer, her voice calm, yet cutting through the tension. "I have seen this before in human history. Lies written into treaties have caused wars that destroyed generations. Words matter. They carry the power to bind peace or unleash destruction. What you call strength is nothing but betrayal." Malkir sneered. "Humans know nothing of true power." Kaldar's eyes blazed. "Enough. I did not build my reign on lies. I will not allow my empire to be stained by falsehood. You have broken trust, Malkor, and trust, once broken, cannot be mended." The vizier's composure cracked further. His voice, once smooth and commanding, rose with desperate fervor. "I did this for the Dominion, for our glory. History would have praised me when we ruled the nebula without challenge." Kaldar stepped forward, towering over him, his armor glinting with authority. "History does not honor deceit. It condemns it. You would have dragged us into dishonor, perhaps even into war. And you dare to call it loyalty? The tension in the chamber thickened. Guards shifted uneasily, waiting for the Emperor's command. The staff held their breath, their eyes darting between Kaldar and Malkor. Lucian clutched his mother's arm, his young face pale but determined. The Emperor raised the parchment high for all to see. This, he declared, was to be the bond of peace, and you tried to turn it into a weapon. You would have led us down a path of ruin. His voice thundered with unshakable conviction. Malkor's defiance flickered again, but this time, beneath the Emperor's gaze, it faltered. He bowed his head, though his voice still carried bitter pride. I did what you were too weak to do. Kaldar's scales shimmered, his voice low but resonant. Strength is not in deception. Strength is in honor. Strength is in truth. You have forgotten this, Malkor. But I will remind you, and all who watch, that the Dominion stands on integrity, not lies. He gestured to the guards. Take him. The guards moved swiftly, seizing the vizier by the arms. Malkor struggled for a moment, then ceased. His face hard, unrepentant. He was led from the chamber, his footsteps fading into the corridor beyond. Silence settled once more. Kaldar turned to Amira and Lucian. His voice softened, though it still carried weight. You have opened my eyes to the betrayal of one I trusted above all others. For that, I owe you both more than words. Amira inclined her head, her expression steady. Lucian looked up at the Emperor, his voice quiet but clear. Sometimes the smallest voices can see the biggest lies. Kaldar studied the boy, then the parchment. His tail flicked once, slowly, as his thoughts turned inward. The confrontation was over, but the storm it had unleashed was only beginning. The Emperor knew that the galaxy would need to hear the truth, openly and without fear. He would face the Council of Worlds not with secrecy, but with honesty, and in that choice lay the true test of his reign. The confrontation with the Vizier had ended, but Kaldar understood it was only the beginning of a far greater trial, one that would define his empire's future, and perhaps the fate of peace across the stars. The chamber was still heavy with tension after Malkor was led away. Silence hung like a shroud, broken only by the faint hum of the station's systems. Emperor Kaldar stood tall, though the weight of betrayal pressed against him. For years he had trusted Malkor, and now the truth revealed how close the Empire had come to disaster. The staff waited nervously, unsure of what would follow. Many avoided the Emperor's gaze, but some looked to him with hope, praying he would guide them through the storm that had begun. Kaldar's eyes fell on Amira and her son Lucian, the unlikely voices who had uncovered the deception. He saw not weakness, but strength born of honesty and courage. Kaldar's deep voice filled the chamber. The Dominion will not hide what has been uncovered today. The treaty must be seen for what it truly is, both in its intended form and in the corrupted version that nearly bound us to dishonor. Tomorrow, before every delegation, I will reveal the truth. Let the galaxy know that the Dominion chooses integrity over deceit. The declaration startled the room. Emperors did not usually admit weakness or betrayal. They spoke only of strength. Yet Kaldar's words carried a different kind of power. It was not the roar of a conqueror, but the resolve of a leader who would not bow to lies. Amira stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, transparency may shock some, but it will also build trust. Honesty is stronger than any hidden clause. You will not lose respect, you will gain it. Kaldar regarded her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You speak with wisdom. You have lived through betrayal before, and still, you stand with courage. The Dominion has need of voices like yours. Lucien's young voice rose, quiet but clear. If you tell the truth, no one can use it against you later. They'll know you didn't choose lies. A faint smile touched Kaldar's lips. A child speaks the truth that many rulers forget. The next day, the great hall of Orion's Gate filled with leaders from across the stars. Representatives of human colonies, avian tribes, aquatic guilds, and machine kin all gathered beneath the vaulted dome. They expected a simple signing, a ceremony of formality. Instead, Kaldar stood before them with the weight of revelation. The hall dimmed as he raised the parchment high. His voice rang out, steady and commanding. Yesterday, a deception was uncovered within this treaty. Words had been twisted to grant my dominion absolute power over the Helian Nebula. Had I signed it, the promise of shared governance would have been a hollow shell. This deception was not the will of the Dominion, but the betrayal of a single man. Vizier Malcor has been stripped of his office. A ripple of shock swept through the assembly. Whispers filled the air, but none dared interrupt. Kaldar's gaze moved across the faces of alien delegates, his tone firm. I do not stand before you to hide this betrayal. I stand to reveal it, so that you may see the Dominion's choice. We will sign the treaty as it was meant to be written, not as it was corrupted. Our honor demands it. Our future depends on it. The hall fell silent, the weight of his words sinking deep. Amira and Lucien stood quietly at the edge of the gathering, watching as the Emperor's honesty shifted the tide. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, representatives stood and bowed their heads in respect. The avian matriarch lowered her wings in salute. The leader of the machine kin projected a light pattern of agreement. Even the human delegation, long wary of Dracorian ambition, nodded in solemn approval. Kaldar had not lost face. He had gained trust. When the moment came, the revised treaty was placed before him. This time, the parchment bore no deception, only the words of balance and cooperation. Kaldar signed his name with steady claws, the ink binding not only the Dominion, but a promise to every world represented there. Afterward, Kaldar called Amira and Lucien before the assembly. This woman and her son saw what others did not. They prevented a disaster not with weapons, but with truth. Amira Tanner will serve as my chief advisor on interstellar language and law, restoring her rightful place among the voices of diplomacy. Her son, though still young, has shown the courage of a warrior and the clarity of a judge. Applause rose in the hall, not thunderous, but sincere, carrying across species and cultures. Amira bowed her head humbly, while Lucien clutched his notebook tightly, his eyes wide with the weight of the moment. Later, as the crowds dispersed and the treaty was secured, Kaldar stood by the tall windows of the hall. The stars stretched endlessly beyond, cold and bright, yet no longer distant. He felt a new sense of purpose. Power alone could not secure the Dominion's future. It was integrity, the courage to face the truth, that would carry his people forward. As he looked at Lucien, walking beside his mother, he realized the boy's words would echo far beyond this day. Sometimes the smallest voices carried the greatest truths. And so the Empire's story shifted course. Not through conquest, not through deceit, but through honesty and unity. It was a new path forward, a path lit not by ambition alone, but by the strength of truth.